Welcome to the show. I am JaiDei Jackson, and welcome to Knowing and Growing. And I have with me Dr. Natasha Lamar of the
Hello,
Wire
hello.
Clinic. Go ahead, introduce yourself.
Hi, so I am Natasha Lamar, a licensed professional counselor, EMDR certified, and also a sex therapist here in Atlanta, Georgia.
Awesome, awesome. So today's topic is going to be about no contact. And what does that mean? That means when adult children decide to go no contact with their family of origin. In other words, they have cut off communication with their parents or with anyone in the family. Sometimes it's the entire family. And it's like, okay, that's my birth family, and I have walked away. Are you familiar with this? Do you have clients that are struggling with this when they show up in your sessions, Dr. Lamar?
Well, that's a really good question. I was going to ask you what had you to bring this topic up. Unfortunately, because I work primarily with adults, specifically with couples and families, I don't get teens or younger, individuals coming in saying that they want to uh, not be in relationship with their family.
But it's not teens, this is adults. In other words, you're in your 30s, your 40s, or even your late 20s, and you're like, I'm tired. I don't want to have anything to do with my parents
Oh.
or my mother or my father. And but what's happening is the parents are the ones who are coming into sessions like, why don't my children talk to me after all I've done for
Mhm.
them, all I've sacrificed for them, and now they don't check in on me, they don't look in on me, they won't return my calls, or and it reminds me of my relationship with my mother. So I'm going to do a little bit of self disclosure here. My mom and I had that relationship where until I began to heal a lot of the stuff that got in the way, I could have gone without talking to her as well. However, I felt that that wasn't the daughterly thing to do. So
Mhm.
quarterly, I would check in on her and see how she's doing. But we didn't begin to have a really good relationship until I was in my 40s. And one of the things that I recall is that she didn't have a good relationship with her mother either.
Mm.
It's interesting how it just passed on. But
Mhm.
we're gonna like dive a little bit into what will have an adult child go no contact.
Mm.
So one of the things that happens with let me ask you this, Dr. Lamar, what do you think would make a child go no contact with their parent?
So there are two things that's kind of popping up in my thought as I'm listening to you ask this question. And one is a person has done some healing and they realize that their family isn't safe, which I encourage, right? Or the trauma is so like the relationship is so toxic and they're not willing to do the work. They don't know what to do. And it's like, you know what? I can't, like, I literally cannot be around them because when I am, it literally makes me sick. And then they just decide to cut it off and just to kind of do away with it. But I encourage it, right? And we talk about this a lot on previous podcasts that we've done, and as I'm working with clients. If a person doesn't serve you well, if a person isn't safe, if a person doesn't provide you the things that you need, I don't care if it is your mom. You need to create healthy boundaries and or discontinue or disconnect that relationship.
And I like what you said because one of the things that a parent feels is that they're still entitled to a relationship
Right,
with their child. In their mind, I'm still your mama, or I'm
right.
still your dad, or I'm still papa, or whomever, however you refer to your family, versus that person no longer feels safe. And if they're in session with me, that means they are working on themselves
Right.
and they're beginning to realize my parents aren't going to change. This environment isn't going to change.
Yeah.
Because sometimes that is what happened when you've changed. The people around you are invested in you being the same way you were. So for instance, if you were a people pleaser, if you were the one that was making sure everybody was taken care of, if you're the person in this dynamic, and now you're like, I'm putting up these boundaries, and they're like, no, we want you to still be the way that you were, and,
Mm-hmm.
but it no longer works for you. and you
Right.
keep having these conversations and you keep talking to them and you keep trying to create something different. And what you realize is that it keeps pulling you back into being toxic yourself or dysfunctional. And you're like, this isn't healthy. And so you want to walk away. And I think the parents don't even realize that when a child makes a decision, even if it's an adult child, we're not talking about, young kids, that is still a painful, hard process to get to this place of, I'm not going to talk to them anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Mm-hmm.
what do you think are some of the things that will have happened that would have kept an adult child from, like, you know what, this is it? Like, I'm done. I've had it.
So you know what I've heard a lot? Parents like, I brought you into this world, I'll take you out. Well, the truth is you really didn't bring me in this world. And I'm not even gonna get on my little spiritual thing of what I think about the responsibility of a parent, but it's oftentimes when a parent, when they hadn't done their healing, or when a parent has had a very toxic relationship with their family, and because we draw to us things are familiar, then you tend to parent from a toxic place, or you tend to struggle having a relationship with your daughter and or son if you didn't have a really good relationship, and you base it on, well, I'm the parent, so what I say goes, and that's just not right. And I feel like when adults are like, you know what, my mama is so toxic or my dad is so toxic, like I really can't do this with them anymore, it's oftentimes an indication that that parent has a lot of unresolved childhood stuff or relational stuff that they just won't even talk about. And oftentimes in certain communities, people just don't want to talk about the past. And when you don't talk about it, it'll continue to cycle until you learn the lesson of what were some of the things that hurt you. You'll continue to do those same things to your children. And I want to ask you this: how many people watching this video find yourself fussing at your children the same way that your mom fussed at you, or your dad, or disciplining your children the way that your parents disciplined you, and you made a vow to yourself that, you know what, when I become a mom, I would never do this, or, when I become a dad, I'll never do this. You become a parent, and then guess what, you do the very thing. And so I think it has a lot to do with unresolved childhood issues when that behavior is kind of perpetuated.
Absolutely. And the thing that can happen is that the parent, because you said a lot of things that were very good. One of the things that you said is that when we think that we're not going to parent the way that we were parent. However, if you haven't addressed like gotten some healing around some of the stuff, or read a book or attended a webinar. And I mean, I love how we're in this environment of the internet.
Yeah.
Done some research. There's a plethora of free stuff out there for you to actually begin this process. However, if you don't think there's anything wrong with what you're doing,
Right.
then you will continue to perpetuate that hurt, that harm, and you don't think anything is wrong with it. You will, and sometimes people fall back on, well, I did the best that I could.
Mm.
And I don't think these the adult children are saying, I wanted you to have done anything differently. I think what they want is for you to take accountability. In other words, let's begin to heal because you've hurt me. In other words, I think the child is saying, well, maybe you didn't intentionally do it because you didn't know any better. But now I'm letting you know that this doesn't work or this is hurtful. And
Yeah.
you are still standing in the space of, I don't know why your feelings are hurt. You shouldn't be hurt. Versus, oh, I'm sorry.
Right.
Oh, let me figure out how I can begin to address this behavior that's impacting or hurting you.
Right. Right.
Was a part of that process. And so when they go no contact and the parents are sitting in my office, they don't realize that their child has really attempted to have these in-depth conversations, but the parent themselves are unwilling to see that their behavior, intentionally or not, has hurt and harmed or created some undesirable consequences that the child is now trying to have this conversation. And it could be as simple as their drinking, their drugs,
Mm-hmm.
the instability, because sometimes children just grew up in a very unstable environment, the moving around from school to school, interrupting my learning in the middle of the semester. Now I'm in a new school or we're in a new area. Those are the things that as a parent, you're like, well, I was doing the best that I could.
Right.
However, that still harmed your child. And
Right.
just take accountability and say, I'm sorry that that hurt you. Or thank you for bringing this to my attention. What can we do to make this better?
Right.
What do you think about that?
Again, I think it goes back to the person, the parent, the adult, willing to do the work. We're like really willing to sit in a place of, you know what, I did the best that I could, but I dropped the ball in a bunch of places. And you know what, I recognize that and I acknowledge that. And you talked about intention, and this is the way that I teach intentions, right? Even if you're not intentionally hurting someone, it doesn't mean that it didn't hurt. And you and I have talked about this too. When someone comes to you and say, you know what, that hurt my feelings, or I didn't like that, or mom or dad, or, this was an issue for me. And most of the time, adults that come from parents who created a lot of harm or trauma, that they don't acknowledge that, oftentimes are parents, and they like, oh my gosh, I would never do this to my child, but my mama did it to me. I would never say the things that my mom, they're really self-reflecting on who they are now as a parent. And it goes back to that intention. You can step on somebody's toe by mistake, but just because it wasn't intentional, it doesn't mean that it doesn't hurt. And so when you acknowledge it, like you said, the parent can say, you know what, I did the best that I could do. I acknowledge it and I apologize, and I wish I could have done better. Parents would be so surprised just how powerful that is, because when you acknowledge your wrongness, or when you acknowledge that you've offended someone, to apologize is only acknowledging. It doesn't, and I want to say this, because sometimes when you apologize, you are saying, my fault, I was wrong. But sometimes when you apologize, you're not necessarily taking an offense or responsibility for that offense, but you're taking responsibility for that person feeling betrayed or feeling let down. Is like, you know what, I'm sorry. I'm sorry that you felt that way. I'm sorry that my finances put you in a place to not feel safe. But it's really acknowledging in that. And when you can do that, you can then begin to repair the relationship. But as long as you stand on, I'm the mama, and children shouldn't question their parents, or what I say go, or I brought you in, I'll take you out, you're actually putting yourself in a place of not repairing the relationship and not wanting to heal. And again, when someone is in your circle or in your community and they're not willing to do the work to heal, like that self-healing or heal the relationship, they don't deserve to be in your circle, whether it's a mother, a grandmother, a husband, a sister, a brother, or anybody relationally to you. So that's just my thoughts about that.
Yeah, it reminds me of, you said some really great things, and it reminds me of when I was having a relationship with my mom. And one of the things that I would used to say about my mother, you don't know her like I knew her, because, and we're going to do a topic about this mother-daughter relationships, because in society, there isn't any space for mothers who don't show up as loving and supportive and all this squishy stuff that we see in the Hallmark movies. And people would say, when you only get one mother or you only get one parent. And the thing that I realized is that's a birth parent. Sometimes I believe that source spirit provides us other nurturing relationships that we can begin to bond with those individuals, because as therapists we're aware of that attachment, and sometimes that's where that insecure attachment comes from, like that abandonment issue. And when I looked at working on my relationship with my mother, it was a choice, but I first had to work on my own relationship with myself, so that when I went back to her, I didn't get sucked in to her stuff, because she still had her pain. She still had her trauma that she experienced, which I realized was not mine to carry. And it wasn't my responsibility to heal her stuff. It was just my responsibility to receive whatever love it is that she had to provide for me, because that's what I had been looking for in all my romantic relationships, was my mother's love. That's what I discovered. However, but I did at a young age go no contact, and then I turned around and went back to begin to deal with that relationship. So for those adult children who have decided to go no contact, you can, once you begin to heal yourself, you can then really begin to have this way of being with someone and not getting sucked in to their stuff and their pain and their trauma, because that's going to be the most important thing. We are coming up on time. So what do you have any last words for our listeners, Dr. Lamar, on this topic?
This is a really good topic, and I think it hits home more than we talk about, especially the mother-daughter relationship, because we're socialized, right, to respect your parents, but they don't say that the parents should also honor their children.
Ooh,
so
girl talk, yes.
Right? And so we're socialized like, that's my mom and I have to give her everything. The truth is you don't. What you're responsible for is for you. And just like you mentioned earlier, if you don't have a really good relationship with your mom, who are other women in your community that you can have a really good relationship with? And so I think this was a very valid point. And the thing that I would say to close is, again, you matter. Honor yourself and know that you don't have to allow things, or you don't have to allow things that are not safe and that does not feel good to you. And for people who have not healed some of that stuff, you don't have to allow them into your circle, into your gate, into your house. It's your responsibility to protect yourself. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think that when we begin to look at, do I have no contact, or do I remain in contact, or do I reintroduce myself to this relationship, you need to remind yourself, the people that you're interacting with, if they have not done any healing, they are not going to change. The person who has changed is you, and you are the one who really need to change. Thank you for listening. Thank you for showing up, for knowing and growing. Once again, join us every week on Mondays for topics that might be of interest. And please let us know by sending us your comments or commenting on what topics you would like for us to talk about. In addition to that, you can follow us both on our social media listings. I am at youareworthy.org. And Dr. Lamar, how can they reach you